Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello there. All right. Hey, Hazel. You have class tomorrow? What? I haven't seen in the office whether I had my guard or not.
I've got mine.
Okay, it's time to begin. Everybody find your seat, like now. No one does. It's time to begin. I'm so happy everybody's here and ready.
Oh my word. That'll get her attention.
Sarge comes to the rescue. Okay, we're in Luke chapter 10. I appreciate the substitutions last week since we were gone to Texas for our last trip for a while. We have been discussing one of the things. I know it's been a week in between, 2 weeks since we've been together, but I was talking about the challenge of studying or reading a parable that you're so familiar with, and that's the Good Samaritan that we looked at last time I was with you. And I appreciate Brian substituting for me last week. Anytime we run across material in the New Testament, or even Old Testament, you're going to have a challenge in looking at it because you're going to think you already know everything about it since you've heard it for so long. And some of you have been raised in the church, so to speak, with a Christian, family, Christian home, and you've heard a lot of these stories and parables. So you may imagine that you already know, everything you need to know about them. And that's just not true. We probably haven't really gotten to the depth of these familiar parables and stories and narratives in the Bible that we could because of our filtering out or our assuming that we studied everything there is to know about it. And of course, the Good Samaritan has crossed over from Christian circles even into the secular culture. Everybody knows who the Good Samaritan is. In fact, you say Good Samaritan and people understand the principle behind it. And some might even be surprised that it's found in the Bible because they may not be familiar with the biblical text. So there's a lot of things like that in our culture where people don't realize the origin of it is in the Bible itself. So we looked at the Good Samaritan and we wanted to read it and get your observations about it to see what you see in it. One of the things that I try to stress with my students is, particularly on the doctoral level, if I have doctoral students, they've been schooled in the biblical text, at least we think they have. That's not always true. Sometimes they know more about what others say about the Bible than they actually know what the Bible teaches. But in order to shake them up, I try to get them into the text to read it and to read it and to read it and read it and read it. And when you do that, you start seeing things that you haven't been aware of before, because you've been filtering those out because we assume we know what the text says. And it's always surprising to me. I had one student, one of the things I do in my doctoral class on hermeneutics, advanced hermeneutics, is I make my students read Genesis 1 through 3, I mean, like, 20 and 30 times. And they think they know it, of course. Everybody, if you're going to start reading the Bible, where do you start? Either Genesis 1 or Matthew 1, right? And when you hit Matthew 1, it's the genealogy, so you go to the next gospel, Mark. You don't have to read the genealogies. And so they read it, and I try to tell them, I say, don't read it with biases. Don't read it with the bias of trying to use it as an apologetic against evolution. Okay? That's how we normally read Genesis chapter 1. We're trying to disprove a theory out there, and you can, but if you step back and you read it, what is it saying? What is it elevating? What are the structures? How's it connected? How do you see it flow? And it's those kinds of things that students are not aware of when they start seeing connections of words and themes, and how the writer will structure the narrative and how he's presenting it. And all of that is critical in understanding what the original intent is. So, and I'm not saying that you can't read the Bible and looking for things that will help in apologetics or help in different ways, or even reading it devotionally. But if you're wanting to really get serious about what the author is teaching, we've got to be familiar with the author and the structure, the words, how he puts it together. And so I have students who come back from reading Genesis 1 through 3 and say, that's the best assignment I've ever had. And I say, why? He says, well, I saw things I never saw before. And this is actually from people who were members of the church, who, of course, they know Genesis 1 through 3. So, some of the most popular things that you could read and know about is, the Jonah, the great fish, and all that, those stories that we've been told all of our lives. If you've been in the church long enough, we have learned everything we can about it. Well, in actuality, we probably learned it when we were a child, and we were taught it as a child could receive it. But Jonah is not written for a child. It's written for the reader, the adult reader, the person that God is wanting us to learn something, concerning ourselves and about the importance of people, and reaching out, our own self-righteousness, all those kinds of things. And so that's why I like to pause and think about some of these parables that we know so well. Now, we brought out a lot of things last time. One of the best ways to understand a parable is understand the context and the reason it was written. Luke tells you why Jesus told the parable. Do you remember what he said? What does Luke say in telling us why he told the parable to this person who said, who is my neighbor? What was it? That's in Luke chapter 10. The parable begins in verse 28. He asked Jesus, what shall I do to inherit eternal life, right? He said, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, thou shalt love your Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered correctly. Now notice this, you have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. And then Luke gives us a little editorial statement before Jesus gives the parable. What's the editorial statement? Wishing to do what?
Justify.
To justify himself. Okay? Jesus tells the parable. So Luke has actually told us why Jesus is telling the parable. Because this guy knows what the law says. He knows what to do. But he's not doing it. But he appears by giving the correct answer. Do this and you will live. Well, everybody there, okay, he's given the correct answer and everybody's assuming that he's doing it, right? He's doing this. But Luke says, wishing to justify himself because he knows that he's what? He's not doing it. Right? The parable. A lot of things about the parable. The person that fell among the thieves, what do you know about him? You don't know anything except he was beat up pretty good. I like how the Bible says he's left half dead. I don't know what half dead is. But all that means is he was left to die. I mean, if no one interceded, he would have died. He's that critical. He's in critical condition. Okay? And so we don't know anything about this thing. We don't know his name. He's called a certain person. We don't know his ethnicity, do we? Is he a Samaritan? Is he a Jew? We don't know that. I assume that he's a Jew because the Samaritan is named, but I really don't know. So perhaps Jesus, in telling that parable, is intentionally not telling us the ethnicity of this individual. Because does it matter? It doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter if he's a Samaritan, if he's a Gentile, if he's a centurion, if he's a Pharisee, a Levite, a Jew, a person of the land, some foreigner. It doesn't matter. Put it up on culture today. It doesn't matter if he's black, he's white, he's Asian, he's Hispanic, he's whatever. It doesn't matter. He fell among the thieves. He got beat up. Someone needs to come to his aid because he's in critical condition. He's in critical condition. Now, the two that you would expect who are representatives of God do what? They see him, but what? They don't do anything. I mean, they observe him. I don't know, maybe he's struggling to breathe. I don't know. You can think about what's happening to him. He's bloody all over, maybe. He's left there half dead. Whatever caused him to be half dead, he's been beaten up and wrong. And so you have this priest and you have the Levite who are symbolic of the worldview of Israel. And I tell you what, they are showing the worldview of Israel all through the Old Testament. Because, what do I mean by that? They represent everything that God did not intend. What is it about them? What did God say through the prophets to Israel? What was Israel to be to the people? A light to the nations. A light to the nations. Here is the perfect opportunity for a priest and a Levite, the representatives of God, to be a light to the nations, to come and help this individual. Okay, we put it another way. We know they were coming from Jerusalem down to Jericho. So we can throw away the idea that if they touched the dead body, they would be, they couldn't fulfill their obligations at the temple. It looks like they've fulfilled it. They've already done it. They're going back home because they're going away from Jerusalem. There's other things, evidently, that are keeping them from getting involved. Jesus doesn't explain all that. We're kind of left hanging. Why? All right, let me put it this way. If an ox fell into a pit, would you leave it there, even if it was the Sabbath? You wouldn't. What if your kid fell into a pit on the Sabbath? Would you just leave him there? No, you wouldn't. See the principle that's involved? Whatever's in the mind of the priest and the Levite should be obvious. At least to me it seems obvious. Maybe I'm misreading. I don't think so, but from the principles that are around, that they are not elevating the human being. Do you know Jesus made concessions for human beings? Well, he never violated anything, but he tried to emphasize that, hey, it's to heal on the Sabbath is fine. The human being is an elevated being of God. It's made in the image of God. And look how you see what's going on, but you're not being involved for whatever reason. Inconvenience, I don't want to, maybe I'm scared, all of these things. I think one of the things of this parable is to elevate the fact of how do we see people, how do we, dare I say, judge people? What do people mean to us? I think that's a good question, because we may think of people being more important to us if they're like us, or a lot of different things can kind of frame our mind. But Jesus left it generic as a person that is in need of help, and the person you wouldn't think would come to his aid. He's in Judea, Samaria. The Samaritan, he's been on a journey. I'm sure he's anxious to go home too. But the one that Jesus uses as a Samaritan, which the Jews hated, which makes me think that the man who fell among the thieves was probably a Jew. To the Samaritan, it wasn't a Jew who needed help, it was a person that needed help. And so he is described, his ethnicity is described, and the reason his ethnicity is described as a Samaritan is because the people that are listening to the parable are who? Jews. But the Samaritans. They hated him. Okay. So, a great parable. Jesus stirs it up to such an extent that people are surprised. He turns the whole story on its head. Now, what's even more profound is you can understand if the person that fell among the thieves was a Samaritan, and the Jews, and the Jew would look at it and say, I don't help that dog. That's how they thought about it. I'm not going to help that individual. He's a Samaritan. Let him die. Live and let live. You would almost, you could appreciate that because that's the way it was, right? Between the Jews and Samaritans. But what if the guy is a Jew and this priest and Levite didn't even help their own? That's even worse, isn't it? You think about it, it's even worse. They're not even helping their own. So Jesus leaves the ethnicity. You can go in all kinds of directions because the principle is far-reaching as far as our interaction with people. What do people mean to you? Are they important to you? Or are they only important depending on who they are, their ethnicity, what they have, things of that nature? So, the man who fell among the thieves, nothing said about him. He's in need. His life is being threatened. The two that you would expect didn't come to his aid. They saw it. Maybe they did a quick prayer for him. I don't know. But they saw it. They walked on about the other side. The Samaritan took time. And notice how Jesus tells us the time involved with the Samaritan. What did he do? He went to the individual and he did what?
Took care of him, and then he took him to his.
Yeah, the first thing he saw him, I can see him jumping off his horse. The agent said he poured oil and wine on the wounds and tries to stabilize him in some way, puts him on his beast, it says, or his horse, and takes him to an inn and asks the person who owns the inn, the innkeeper, to look out for him. And he gives money because he has to go. But when he comes back, he'll pay more, if the innkeeper has, done more than what was already given. Was the Samaritan inconvenienced? He wasn't he? Did the Samaritan have somewhere to go? Yeah. Did he sacrifice? How did he sacrifice? His time, his money. There's a lot of things that are mentioned about the Samaritan, which is going to burn the ears of all the Jews who are listening to this. Even the guy who Luke said, wishing to justify himself. See, he's given the appearance that he is righteous, that he is faithful, that he is good, he is the man of God. And so he's got to, within his own mind, you could tell he's even troubled about his lack of faithfulness. Luke says he wishing to justify himself. He should have just shut up, not said anything, he wouldn't have been embarrassed, right? But he didn't. He felt guilt, wishing to justify himself. He said, who then is my neighbor? Like he doesn't know. Now let me ask you that question. Do you not know who your neighbor is? We know, don't we? It's not like anybody doesn't really know what the commandment of God is asking us. We know what it is. Then what's the issue? What's the issue then? It's not the knowing, it's the doing. There you got Book of James in a nutshell. It's the doing. So we hide behind this idea that we really don't know, because maybe in some ways we wish to justify ourselves. And I'm talking about generally lots of things that we know that God teaches. We know what the principles are. We know what the right way is. It's not that difficult. I don't believe it's difficult. There are some difficult things in the Bible, but as far as the basic things of what we need to do, what faith is on, we know. But wishing to justify ourselves, we ask the question. Well, when you ask that kind of question, you expect to be embarrassed or humiliated, because we're seeking to justify ourselves. We're seeking to, let me ask it this way. You tell me. What does it mean, wishing to justify himself? He asked, who is my neighbor?
I would think he was trying to either make himself look holy or clear his conscience by trying to justify himself.
Okay. So either look.
But because he says, Jesus said you kept all, and he said he's kept all those commandments. But then, it's just like you said, he should have stopped at that, but he didn't.
But he said that he kept all the commandments. Even the one that says, love your neighbor as yourself.
And then he wanted to know who's my neighbor.
Yeah. Why is that? Why would he focus on that one and not the other one?
Because he had doubt that he maybe had been
He probably knew.
loving his neighbor as he should.
Yeah. He probably knew. Maybe this guy was ruthless in business. Maybe he was ruthless in his lawyer. Maybe it was he took advantage of people and various things. He knew, but he was in a position of reputation. I don't know. There's lots of things to think about, right? Stan, you want to say something?
He may very well have been good to the Jews, but he may have just had a total different attitude toward somebody who may have even been on spirit. One thing to me, though, as elders, we often have people come to us asking for help. And we have one rule, and that is err in the way of conscience.
Right.
If there's any question, first we help. and then we seek to find answers. But sometimes it's difficult to find answers as to why a person's doing so. Will they do this again? I mean, but some of those things are not for us to know.
Well, and plus, our culture has a lot of things available for people that are in need.
They do.
And pointing them to that or whatever. I think Jesus, he often uses an extreme example in order to teach and for a lesson.
That's right.
And we probably, I don't think we'd be this way, but if we found someone that we saw that was in an accident, I feel pretty sure probably all of us would take some kind of action or think about it, either calling the police or finding out what's wrong with the individual or whatever. I remember Sharon and I were on a trip. This is the weirdest thing I ever saw. And we were behind this 18-wheeler. And this 18-wheeler came out on the road and turned too quick. And it started to go like that. I said, she's going to go, she's going to go. And the thing just fell off and just crashed that thing. And we were, going to see what's inside of it. It was just garbage, we were going to go out there and get things. No, I'm just it fell on the side of the road. And I stopped. And I got out, and I ran up. I was going to run to the cab to see if the guy was okay, and all of a sudden he popped up out. So they called the cab fell over too, and he popped his head out of the window, And it just made me think of this kind of thing. Would we stop and do it? I think we all would, in some way, unless you were very prejudiced or cold-hearted to the needs of a human being. And unfortunately, the Jewish elitists were cold-hearted to the needs of even their own people. So it's an extreme situation to bring to light an attitude that can be destructive. Okay? On any level, what is our attitude on any level about others? See how he's bringing the teaching out, because this is how you kind of shock people. And it was such a shock that when he asked, which one proved to be a neighbor, what did the guy say? The one who showed mercy. He didn't say, well, of course, the Samaritan. No, he couldn't bring us up to say that probably. He said the one who showed mercy. And that's the key. God desires mercy, toward people. Yes.
A couple of things. One is, over the years, I've had people ask, should we help in every circumstance that we see? Well, the Lord gives us all common sense and a good mind where we can tell normally if it's a legitimate need situation or if it's something that's set up. Like somebody on the side of the road with their hood up.
Yeah.
It could be that their car's broke down, or it could be that they're waiting for somebody to come over there and knock the door and steal money from them.
Yeah.
You can always, as you said, call and have people to come to them, authorities, to take care of that. But if a situation like somebody's, like you're talking about, is a wreck, and there's obviously help that's needed, yeah, we need to do that as much as we possibly can. Second thing is, verse 33, it says, when he saw him, he felt compassion.
Yeah.
That's the key on this.
That goes to the one who showed mercy. We don't show mercy unless we have compassion for people.
The priest Levite did not show compassion, didn't feel
They
compassion.
didn't have compassion. And the lawyer, that's his problem.
Yeah.
That's the situation that the lawyer who brought it up, that's his issue. I've kept the law. I love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. He was probably faithful in the duties and things that a person needed to do as a Jew, right? and loved his neighbor as himself, as he's probably pretty good, with those around him that he knew. He was kind to those who were kind to him. But his central problem was he did lack compassion and mercy. That's his issue. So does he love his neighbor? No, not in the way that God is looking for. So it's not, John uses this in 1 John. He says, if a person closes himself up and doesn't give to others, how can the love of God be in that individual? You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Now, would there be a way maybe that they could have known whether he was a Samaritan or a Jew by his dress, because he may very well have been, if he was beaten and all his valuables taken, and those kind of things, it could easily have been that all of those things which would have identified who he was with, which group of people it was, may have very well been taken away. And they didn't stop to find out.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Jesus' story, that he's left it unknown, because that doesn't matter as far as the identity of the individual. What if he was a poor man? What if he was the beggar on the street, Lazarus? What if he was the rich man? Does it matter if we have a human being that is in this kind of situation? It's kind of like, compassion and mercy ought to be natural among those who walk with God. It ought to be a natural thing.
I always thought it's implied, since they're coming down the same way from Jerusalem and Jericho. In my mind, I've always thought they possibly were at worship together.
Yeah.
That they recognized this fellow from when they were all together in the synagogue.
Yeah. It might be like having someone worship together. Maybe you're a tenant of a renter, a member of the church, and they're having a hard time. But you're the landlord, and you're really tough and brutal with them. That could fall into the same kind of situation, I think. Well, I got my business, but look at it from a different point of view. What can we do to assist and help a brother or sister in Christ? But not only that, but I know there's people out there take advantage of things. And you're right, Stan, we can't always know. When I was in Tallahassee, one of my elders, he was retired, and he was a retired, was it a police, Sherry, was he a retired sheriff or a police highway
chief.
Patrolman? Chief.
Highway patrolman.
Yeah. And he dealt with all of the elements, and it was fascinating because he dealt with it so tenderly, and he would find out whether it's legit or not just by it. But he would help those who helped us. I'm sure sometimes, I remember helping one guy came and needed, and I led him into the building, went to my office, and we talked a little. He's a big old guy. We talked a little bit, and I didn't recognize it. I started to recognize it. I remember you from, like last month or whatever. For some reason it dawned on me. And I remember it was a scam then. I said, I'm not going to give you anything. He got up. Said, I'm going to cut you. So, I got out of my office real quick. And we had a hard time getting him out of the building, but he was one that, was in it for a different reason. And I learned some lessons during that time, but, don't lose your compassion and concern for people. And it's not like we don't know who those people are. I don't think there's always this inability sometimes to know the scammers and those who aren't. We could use that to justify ourselves, couldn't we? Just like that man did. So, a lot of things to think about, isn't it? It's an interesting prayer. So, are we good to go on? I think we got the idea behind it. Now we come to another one that's equally as interesting. Mary and Martha. Luke is the only one that recorded this. And we have now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village. And a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her and said, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion which will not be taken away from her. Interesting. What stands out to you in this familiar story?
Martha is very passive aggressive. She's sitting right there. Will you tell Martha?
Well, can you blame Martha? I mean, it was the custom back then that you would expect Mary and Martha to be, up and about and being hospitable, and Martha's not contributing. I mean, honestly, what stands out? Would you be a little irritated if you were Martha? You would? I'm just asking. I don't know. Judy, does that irritate you?
Yeah, it probably would a little.
Yeah. What else stands out? Doesn't mean Martha's a bad person.
She was letting the things like serving and all that take the place of listening to the Lord. Mary chose to listen.
Yeah. Martha's not doing anything that's wrong.
She's not doing anything wrong.
In fact, at any other time, it'd have been the right thing to do. It's just the right thing at the wrong time.
How many times are you going to have the Son of God sitting in your living room teaching you?
Exactly.
That's what he's trying to do.
I have to expect Mary, she wants everything to go well.
Yeah.
And make sure that her Lord is taken care of and the disciples are there with her. I think that's pretty noble, isn't it? Wouldn't you want that? How many of us, when we have guests over and stuff, kind of doing that? What else do you notice?
One is looking spiritual and the other is working the things of the Lord.
Okay. Stan said one's looking at spiritual things and one's looking at things of the world. How so? What's the spiritual and what's the world? How would you categorize that?
She's caught up, Martha's caught up in the physical, the here and now. In other words, she's distracted. As the scripture says, she's distracted. She's not paying attention necessarily to what Jesus is saying, not because she doesn't want to. It's she thinks the more important thing is getting things ready for it. And overlooking the fact that you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to hear him teach right here in your house, and she's not paying attention.
Wait a minute, I'm going to check my phone. Wait a minute.
Yeah, you're being distracted.
But can I make
Distraction,
a
right?
point? But if Mary had helped Martha, Martha could have sat down like Mary did.
Yeah, they'd have got it done and make both of
They
them.
could both sit down.
Yeah.
She was actually enjoying the moment. That stop and smell the roses. Some things can wait.
Okay.
I use an analogy with a bunch of kids a lot of times on tours, taking pictures of things rather than listening to me. They go into the Capitol and see the dome, how pretty it is, and the first thing they do is grab the cameras rather than actually seeing it. And I think a lot of that was, she was sitting there taking in the moment. That can wait. Let's do this first. Let's listen to him.
Yeah, you almost get the feeling that Mary doesn't ever help. I mean, this is a record, of two ladies here, and
Well, it's the last verse there, 42, that sums it up. Because Jesus says, Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken
never
away
be
from
taken
her.
away from her.
So that sums it up right there. I mean, she
So-
chose what will never be taken away, Jesus' teachings, and take it in the moment, rather than Martha focusing on the physical, which one day will be gone. So,
It's not who's better than the other.
right.
Has nothing to do with that. It's not who's a servant and one isn't. I don't think it has anything to do with that. It's the ability, it seemed that Mary had, as Paul suggested, that this was a very important moment.
I don't think that Mary never helped her. I think
Yeah,
Mary
I know.
probably did.
I'm sure she did.
It's just that Martha expected her to help her now, and things that Mary, like you're saying, and like Elizabeth said, the necessary thing, Jesus says, one thing is necessary. In this circumstance, in this situation, this moment, one thing's necessary, and that's pay attention to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Could we relate that to being in our worship service when we are focusing on God and worship of Him, but maybe we got our mind on something else?
Right. That, or even, we could, one of the, I think, things that you can take attention off of is that of distractions. You know, think of that which distracts us from what is most important. Think of the value we confer on things that might legitimately be good things that keep us from the moment. Does that make sense? I think that's important for us to identify. I don't know what that is for you and me, but I can look at myself and see, you know, yeah. Sometimes I think some things are very important when in reality, the moment is calling me to something else. What else do you say?
Martha's kind of quick to complain. She's like, I have to do this. Well, she doesn't have to do that. She can sit down and listen also.
Yeah. So she's complaining. She goes to the Lord. This is interesting. Her case is so right in her mind that she even goes to the Lord and asks Him to put Mary where she ought to be.
Passive aggressive.
That's how sure she was. So what is in other words, let me ask you this. There's another parable that Luke talks about. What is Mary trying to get Jesus involved in?
Mary or Martha?
I mean Martha, I'm sorry. What is Mary? What is Martha? They didn't start with him. What is Martha trying to get Jesus involved in?
Family dispute.
Squabble, family disputes between maybe there's sister rivalry. I don't know. I remember on another occasion when someone in the crowd asked Jesus to tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. You remember what he said? Am I an arbitrator between you and your brother? I mean, that's not my thing. You know, this is not why I'm here. Jesus did not get caught up, dare I say, petty things. They're petty compared to what?
His teaching.
To his teaching, the spiritual things. But we emphasize what? This is kind of hard to accept this, but we may emphasize the petty things. Now, that's not saying they're not important, right? I didn't say they're not important or things that we're concerned about or worried about. Martha is illustrating a state of being disconcerted and worried, and she's anxious. Notice what? It's not just this.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that Martha's character or example is telling us that Jesus is bringing out. He said, Martha, Martha. That's interesting that he would use the name twice. Martha, Martha. What's Jesus doing? He's getting her attention, calming her down. She's she's riled up by the situation. Martha, Martha. Then what does he say?
You are worried and bothered about many things.
Yeah, you are worried and bothered about many things. Many things. So, I wonder what the bowl of things is filled with. It's not just this situation, but it may be other things that Jesus is sort of helping her along. It's not saying that Mary's perfect, but at least in this situation, Mary has chosen the right thing. She's illustrating what Jesus wants at the moment, at the emphasis of something that will not be taken away. What will be taken away from us? What will rust, thieves, and others take away?
House, possession.
Everything, material, right? Think about it. I have bought a lot of new things that have gotten old. You know? We have a word for it, we might call it an antique, but it's still old.
Yeah.
You know? And the thing about it is, in the final analysis, it's all going to be burned up and non-existent. But what is it that we fill our bowl with? What is it? What gets our concern, our attention? You know, just our worries. It's all about this life stuff, isn't it?
It's a window into how all too often we are.
Yeah.
We are worried. We are bothered about many things.
Yeah. That's what, you know, you remember in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaching about don't worry about what you're going to wear, where you're going to live, all these kinds of things. The Father knows that you have need of these things. And what's the answer to it? Seek first His kingdom. That's just so hard because I'm bothered and worried about a good many things. So to seek first the kingdom is in competition with those good, you know, many things that bother and concern. So there always has to be that, you know, ability within us, the maturity, the spiritual growth, to put things, I think, in their proper place, which seems to be what Jesus is emphasizing here. There's a proper place, proper time for things. And at this moment, Jesus being there, you need to sit down and listen. Okay. Thank you.
Her mom always had to say, when I mentioned about what Jesus said, she was like, easy. She was that one, but she had to